Well, Richard Allen's defense team appears to be pivoting from that theory that Odin's killed Abby and Libby to the state's attack of their timeline of events, saying that it's flawed and that nobody can prove that Richard Allen was at the crime scene where the Delphi homicides occurred. And with all this additional noise, they're also appealing the judge's decision to exclude evidence of third-party culpability. Is this a conspiracy in the making or a whole bunch of noise? Well, hey everybody, thanks for listening to Profiling Evil, and please take a moment to hit that like and subscribe button. Make sure that you're ringing the bell so that you're getting all of our notifications on videos just like this one. And please consider sharing us with your friends. And you can do all of that after you've given us a thumbs up on the video. Now, accused double murderer Richard Allen is doubling down on the requests he's making to the court. Everything from demanding that the jury be taken to the crime scene so that they can kind of vicariously roll in the dirt, go where Abby and Libby walked, and stand where the two girls were senselessly murdered. I don't know. I'll let you decide, but it does make good sense for them to see the crime scene. Now, the court recently blocked the defense's team their hopes of introducing a boogeyman as the killer. In criminal cases, this can be one of the defense team's most important strategies, suggesting that somebody else is responsible for a crime, these murders. That would mean, in his case, somebody else planted that bullet next to the bodies, the bullet that was cycled through the 9mm gun that was recovered from Richard Allen's home. And of course, that would mean that somebody else is responsible for the killings. When the judge ruled out that third-party killer, she effectively prevented Allen's lawyers from introducing evidence or even arguments that another person or persons were responsible for the murders of Abigail Williams and Liberty German. Now, you'll recall that that special judge, Fran Gohl, issued a number of orders that denied Richard Allen's defense team for any attempt at raising the potential of a third-party suspect in the killings. The judge also declared that Richard Allen's 60-plus alleged confessions he made to his family and other people inside the Westfield Correctional Facility, can be introduced into the trial. That is going to be a tough hill to climb for Allen. His defense team, according to the judge, didn't prove that the admissions were made under duress. So now the defense has gone on the defense and appealed the decision, barring alternative murder theories, claiming that because of the judge's rulings, quote, Richard Allen's defense is completely gutted, close quote. Now, I thought you might be interested in a few key reasons why the defense team is now appealing the decision. A couple of things outside of the obvious, but we're going to talk about the obvious. Number one, presenting alternate suspects was the defense team's key strategy in this case. By excluding third-party culpability, the court essentially prevents the defense from pointing to other suspects, anything that might raise doubt of Richard Allen's guilt by implicating somebody else. The defense likely wanted to introduce evidence or theories that other individuals could be responsible for these murders, which would create reasonable doubt in the minds of the jurors. But without the ability to suggest alternate suspects, the defense's options for creating this doubt are significantly limited. This appeal is likely going to include an argument that suggests that excluding such evidence deprives Richard Allen of his constitutional right to a fair trial, and it prevents them from fully exploring alternative scenarios that could eventually exonerate him. Number two, insufficient opportunities to challenge the prosecution's case. Allen's defense may feel that excluding third-party culpability hampers their ability to challenge the prosecution's narrative. In a case where forensics or circumstantial evidence is key, like this case, introducing the possibility of a third-party involvement could be crucial to raising questions about the strength of the state's case. And I think those questions are among many of you. Now, the defense might be seeking to introduce evidence related to other suspects that could challenge the timeline of events, that could suggest alternate motives, that could raise questions about the origin of forensic evidence, such as the DNA, footprints, fibers, the bullet that was recovered. By excluding this, the judge is essentially reinforcing the prosecution's version of events, limiting the defense's ability to counter it. Number 3, evidence pointing to other potential suspects. Now, there may be specific individuals that the defense wants to point to as alternate suspects. We've already got an inkling of who some of those were. For instance, over the years, multiple people were publicly associated with the Delphi case. Some were even questioned or investigated by law enforcement. Now, while these individuals weren't ultimately charged, the defense may feel that some evidence related to them is still very relevant. And frankly, they feel that it should be considered by the jury. So it'd be interesting what your thoughts are, and I'm hoping you're thinking about these and putting them down below. But the defense team's argument might be even that law enforcement dismissed certain individuals as suspects in the case. They believe the jury has the right to weigh the evidence and determine for themselves whether somebody else, other than Richard Allen, could be responsible for these heinous crimes. Number 4, taking away some of the defense strategies could actually threaten the constitutional right of this presumption of innocence that we all are given. The exclusion of a third-party culpability and evidence can be seen as harmful to Allen's presumption of innocence. So think about the fact that in a criminal trial, the defense is not required to prove someone else committed this crime. They only need to raise enough question in the juror's mind that would say that maybe Richard Allen didn't do this and raise reasonable doubt about his guilt. By preventing the defense from suggesting third-party involvement, the judge's ruling essentially is really strengthening the state's case, this presumption of Allen's guilt, without giving the jury the full picture of all the possible explanations. Now, Allen's defense team is likely appealing to ensure that the jury has the opportunity to hear all of the relevant information. And I'm not saying evidence, all of the relative information, which could include alternative suspects or explanations for these murders as they occurred. Number 5, protecting Allen's right to a full defense. The appeal is grounded in protecting Allen's Sixth Amendment right under the U.S. Constitution, and that guarantees the right to a fair trial. We're all given that, and we'd be fighting pretty hard if we were the ones on trial. And this includes the right to present a defense. Now, the defense might argue that excluding third-party culpability is an infringement by the court on Allen's ability to mount some kind of a comprehensive defense. They might assert that presenting evidence of other suspects is critical to challenging the state's case, and that excluding such evidence undermines the fairness of the trial. I really want to know what your thoughts are on this, and we're going to kind of circle back, but I wanted to talk about joining investigative journalist Susan Hendricks, who's been on this show. She's the author of the incredible book Down the Hill about the Delphi murders. She and I were on Court TV with Vinnie Politan, and we talked about and reflected on the time the Delphi murder case has gone from happening to arrest and now leading up to the trial. During our conversation, Vinnie Politan asked me why it took so long for law enforcement to figure out that they'd actually interviewed Richard Allen shortly after the murders. I mean, they went almost 5 years before they brought him back to the surface. So let's look at that exchange.
Yeah, Mike King, it seems, because he's more interested in the 3 girls who were walking in the other direction. But my goodness, they have a video of the guy, so they know it's a male that they're looking for, who is by himself. This guy is a male. He said he was by himself, that he was there that day, and you take down the statement and then you forget about it for 5 years? Like, I understand the Scrivener's error that may have existed there in you know, messing up the last name with the address, et cetera, but they were able to figure it out 5 years ago when they looked at the tip again. This isn't just a tip, this is a lead, Mike.
Yeah, Vinny, it's a little bit disturbing when you think about it from that perspective. And I guess what I find myself doing is trying to give law enforcement the benefit of the doubt that maybe this officer did take the name down wrong, that this thing got cataloged when the leads were coming in. They had hundreds of leads that they're dealing with, and that somehow this gets lost in the mix. What really is troubling, and the part that I join the rest of us in scratching our head on, is that he looks like the guy in the video that they have. He says, I'm on the trail. He is coming forward and saying, hey, I saw 3 girls. So he's specific about certain pieces of information, but not about other pieces of information. He openly admits he has clothes that are similar. But the thing that I keep wanting to know that I can't get an answer to, Vinny, is how did he come into law enforcement's view? Did he walk into the police department and say, hey, I heard you had a murder out on Monon High Bridge Road Trail, and I just want to let you know I was out in the area? And if so, why was he doing that? Was he doing damage control, or was he really a concerned citizen that's saying, hey, I didn't see anything out there? So I think there's a lot more to this tale than we're getting right now with just this tip and lead. But then once it ends up in the Bureau's hands, whether it's filed into their records management system called Sentinel, and then that tip is extracted later, or whether it just is completely forgotten and is sitting on a yellow notepad somewhere, it takes them that 5 years to go back with a fresh set of eyes and start looking at the case and saying, holy cow, here's a guy who says he was down there on the trail, and we haven't interviewed him yet.
Like, I was there. Like, how many people were there that day? Not that many. Like, he said he was there. And just to put this in some perspective, I want to show you some of the press conferences and leads through the years going back to like 2017 up to 2021. Take a look.
Basically, we have identified the bodies of the 2 females that were found out yesterday. The bodies have been positively identified as Abigail J. Williams, 13, of the Delphi area, and Liberty Rose Lynn German, 14, of the Delphi area. We have nobody in custody at this time. So as far as I'm concerned, yes, there is somebody out there that did this horrendous crime, and we're going to track them down.
To the killer who may be in this room. We believe you are hiding in plain sight. For more than 2 years, you never thought we would shift gears to a different investigative strategy, but we have. We likely have interviewed you or someone close to you. We know that this is about power to you, and you want to know what we know. And one day, you will.
While investigating the murders of Abigail Williams and Liberty German, detectives with the Carroll County Sheriff's Office and the Indiana State Police have uncovered an online profile named Anthony Schatz. This profile was being used from 2016 to 2017 on social media applications, including but not limited to Snapchat and Instagram. The fictitious Anthony Schatz profile used images of a known male model and portrayed himself as being extremely wealthy and owning numerous sports cars. The creator of the fictitious profile used this information while communicating with juvenile females to solicit nude images, obtain their address, and attempt to meet with them. Investigators would like any individual who communicated, met, or attempted to meet the Anthony Schatz profile to contact law enforcement by utilizing the tip email, Abby and Libby tip at ca
Hey folks, I want to pause just long enough in our discussion about the Delphi case to also tell those of you who donate to Profiling Evil a little bit about what we've been doing with some of that money you so graciously give. And if you're interested in donating, you can hit this QR code and send money to Profiling Evil. It helps us pay the bills, but it also helps us get to do some really important things. Thankfully, I have a nice career with a nice retirement, so I don't need the money coming in from Profiling Evil. And we try to push it toward things that are making a difference. You all know how we've been putting money toward the building of a new Children's Justice Center. I received this image today from the Children's Justice Center director of the building that's under construction, slated to have an open house ribbon cutting in the spring of 2025. We are so excited, and because you've purchased my book, Deceived, I've been able to funnel all those funds toward helping in this building of the Children's Justice Center. In fact, the children from the book Deceived were the first recipients of the services in the first Children's Justice Center back in 1990. Very exciting for us to do so. But I wanted to also mention that last week we had the opportunity to attend the Weber State University Scholarship Luncheon, where a bunch of new kids were given scholarships to help them offset the costs of a college education. Now, these are students in the criminal justice profession. These are kids who are either working in law enforcement today or they plan on working in law enforcement in the future. And Profiling Evil over the years has been able to donate every year toward this scholarship opportunity. And we did so again this week. And so anyway, I just wanted to say thank you for donating. And I wanted you to know that we're not traveling to Hawaii on your money, but we're trying to turn around and give it back in places that it can really make a difference. But along the way, we're covering the bills here at Profiling Evil to make sure that we've got the disk space and the camera equipment and the other things we need to keep rolling out quality videos. Now let's get back to the Delphi investigation, but thanks again for all of your donations toward Profiling Evil. And if you're so inclined, please consider donating toward our efforts. You can do so by hitting this QR code or the links down below. Thanks. Now let's get back to the Delphi case. Well, I hope you'll go back and watch that entire interview because it really was a good exchange of information between the three of us. But I want to focus on one of the questions that Vinny posed to me, more around this idea of how does a single predator gain control over multiple girls, 2 girls in this particular case. You see, when a victim complies with a criminal's orders rather than fighting back, their mindset is often shaped by several psychological and situational factors. These factors can create a survival-based response to the immediate threat. And so I thought it might be interesting as kind of a way to explore this together that we look at some of the key reasons why victims react in this way. So number 1, the survival instinct. The primary instinct in a life-threatening situation is survival. Compliance can feel like the safest option because resisting in our minds could escalate the violence or increase the risk that there might be injury or death. Victims, in this case the girls, might have assessed the situation and determined that submission would reduce harm, especially if they were confronted with something like a weapon in this particular case. The second reason is fear and shock. Victims are usually in a state of shock when they're confronted by a criminal. We don't act this way. It messes our mind up to think that other people do. The fear response then triggers this fight, flight, or freeze kind of response. And this can happen because the mind is overwhelmed by fear. It leaves the victim unable to think clearly or act decisively, thus compliance. Reason number 3, power imbalance. Now keep in mind, if this predator approached those girls and pointed a gun at them, there's an incredible power balance, not to mention a grown adult man and 2 pre-juvenile girls. Criminals often assert dominance through intimidation, threats, weapons. creating this significant power imbalance. Victims can feel helpless and perceive that they lack the strength or the ability to successfully fight back. This imbalance makes compliance seem like the most logical option and the only way that they would minimize harm to themselves. Reason number 4, perceived unpredictability of the criminal. Think about it. Criminals are often erratic and unpredictable. A victim might comply because they believe that any resistance would only provoke the criminal into becoming more violent or more aggressive. By following orders, we, or the victims, hope that they might avoid triggering a more dangerous reaction from the predator. Number 5, rational calculation. Some victims might actually engage in a form of mental risk assessment, weighing the potential outcomes of resistance versus compliance. They might believe that compliance offers a higher chance of survivability, or it might offer a chance for escape. And this can be especially true in situations where fighting back seems unlikely to succeed. Number 6, lack of training or confidence. Most people are not trained in self-defense. They've not been in life-threatening situations before. They might lack confidence or the know-how to fight back, making compliance seem like the only viable option to them. Even if a person is capable of resisting, the unfamiliarity of the situation can lead to a default reaction of compliance. Just get it over with. Number 7, a hope for resolution without violence. Again, we don't act this way. We project that onto the predator. Victims might comply out of a belief that the criminal will eventually stop the aggression if they just follow their orders. They hope that by cooperating that the criminal will take what they want and then leave without creating further harm. This hope for nonviolent resolution drives compliance, especially when a victim is trying to preserve their own life. None of these reasons you can blame someone for, by the way. Number 8, social conditioning. Many of us are conditioned to avoid confrontation, especially when we're dealing with people who appear to have authority or who are physically threatening. This conditioning, reinforced by societal norms, can cause people to comply with demands almost automatically rather than fight back. Number 9, trauma response. And this is a tough one because this is people that have dealt with this kind of abuse over and again in their life. In some cases, compliance is a response to trauma. The brain might be disassociating, in essence, becoming numb in overwhelming situations, causing the victim to almost act passively, as though they're not fully present in the situation. Now, this can happen when the brain is protecting itself from the emotional or psychological weight of the event. We're trying to disengage so we don't have to deal with it. Reason number 10 is fear of retaliation. In some cases, victims know who the predator is, or they might comply because they fear that not only will they have immediate harm if they don't, but perhaps future retaliation, especially if the criminal's threatening them or their loved ones. If a victim believes that a criminal actually has the ability to track them down later if they resist, compliance can seem like the safest option for long-term safety. Number 11 is this idea of learned helplessness. Some victims actually have experienced abuse or prior traumatic events that have conditioned them to believe that they're powerless in threatening situations. This leads to a state of learned helplessness where the victim actually feels that fighting back is futile and that compliance is the only choice. Number 12, psychological manipulation. Criminals will often use psychological tactics to manipulate their victims. They might use verbal threats, intimidation, or emotional abuse to make the victim feel as though they have no other choice but to comply. Now, this can erode the victim's will to resist and can make them feel powerless in these kinds of cases. In essence, the mindset of the victim who complies with a criminal's orders, driven by a mix of survival instincts, fear, shock, rational risk assessment, all of it combined. The ultimate goal for the victim is self-preservation, which in many cases makes compliance seem like the best choice or the least risky choice of all. Let's watch this clip.
Mike King, as we went through in trying to track where they were, crossing the creek, one man, two victims. How does that work? Because I think the defense will try to paint perhaps a different picture of what's going on here, but how does one man with two victims pull this off? Because they're traveling some distance here.
Yeah, I think we're seeing evidence that would support a theory that I'm going to pitch, and that is that a person with a weapon, a gun in this particular case, would certainly gain immediate control over the girls. And so in a confrontation where he's just a creepy guy on the bridge, they might say no and they might try to run. Even if he pulled a knife and they had some distance between them, they might try to run away. But to immediately gain that kind of control, knowing that a bullet is found at the scene, and I know that this is a challenging point for a lot of folks out there, but that bullet, that unspent bullet being forensically tied back to a weapon recovered in Richard Allen's house makes me really think, is it possible, and probably more probable, that a weapon was displayed and the girls were ordered down the hill? And people like you and me, Vinny, we're gonna respond. We don't have an evil mind and an evil intent. And so somebody that just says, hey, go down the hill, we're gonna think, I'll do whatever you want, just let's get this over with and get on your way. But he immediately gains control, and I believe that's the way in which he does it. And it really helps us understand those different crime scenes that we often talk about here on Court TV, because we see this initial contact site on the bridge where the two groups of people, the predator and the victims, come into space and time. And then we see the crime scene where we believe the crime scene happened, and there might be multiple places. And then we see possibly even a shift. If the clothing is dispersed in one place and the bodies are in another, is it possible there are multiple crime scenes? And then a final disposal site where those girls are left after they've been killed. We really start to piece this thing together, and we start to understand the behavior of the predator. And so in short, easy to gain control over two people if you have a weapon, and their mindset is, I'd never do anything mean, but the predator's mindset is, this is exactly what I'm going to do. Well, I hope this discussion has helped explain some of the possible reasons why Abby and Libby complied with the down-the-hill orders that they received from their ultimate killer. Now, understanding these possibilities might help you to reconcile what could have happened and even help you theorize how one killer can actually have control over multiple victims, and in this case, two pre-teenagers. I hope you'll take time to share your thoughts below on these theories and possibilities. You know, as we were talking through this, I remembered an experience when I was a young man working as a gas station attendant in downtown Salt Lake City. I was in high school at the time, working, believe it or not, the afternoon shift, closing at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. I had a really wise neighbor who reached out to me one time, knowing that I was down in this rough part of town until the late hours. And he taught me that if I was ever approached by someone who was trying to rob me at gunpoint, that I shouldn't comply at all, and that I should take off running at the first chance I have and run as hard as I can, never agreeing to go to a back room or to be tied up. I was taught to run and take my chances. Now, I'm not recommending this strategy, but it is one that I adopted personally, and thankfully, I never had to activate my plan. But I thought about it over and over. I thought about it for years and years, and it's actually helped me understand more about my own behavior in contrast to an offender's behavior. Just because I wouldn't hurt someone doesn't mean they wouldn't. So as we wait for news on the appeal of Richard Allen's case, remember that this is about ensuring this accused killer a fair trial. His defense team has to ensure that they can present the fullest defense possible, which includes introducing evidence or arguments that somebody else might have been responsible for the murders of Abigail Williams and Liberty German. The defense's strategy might hinge on creating reasonable doubt, and the exclusion of this opportunity to show this evidence significantly narrows their ability to do so. I don't personally like it, but he does deserve the right to have those additional theories brought up, in my opinion. And who am I? I'm nobody. But it certainly causes confusion and muddying of the prosecution waters. The state has to be ready to present their evidence in a compelling way to ensure that the jurors can make the best decision regarding Richard Allen's guilt or innocence. Hey, please put your comments down below, and please look for Profiling Evil on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And make sure you're subscribing to Profiling Evil's audio podcasts on your favorite podcast platform. And if you haven't checked out our missing persons and unsolved murders map on profilingevil.com, please go over there and look around. It is an amazing place where you can look for criminal cases in your own neighborhood. Now, if you find that there are cases from your town that are missing, you can enter them in and join this social experience that we're creating here at Profiling Evil. Make sure you sign up for that digital newsletter we have called the Bolo. You have to do it while you're on the site at profilingevil.com, and I promise I'll never share your contact information. It's only your email address. Hey, thanks for supporting Profiling Evil, and we'll see you soon at the next crime scene.